My name is Carter Birmingham. I'm a social scientist here at the Institute for Tourism and Recreation Research. We are in the W.A. Franke College of Forestry and Conservation here at the University of Montana. And we're going to be talking about Montana's outfitting and guiding industry. And this is a study that we did recently on the outfitting and guiding industry. It's something that we've actually done in the past a couple of times, but it really focuses on the economic contribution that the industry has to the state, and we look at it from two sides. So one side, we have a survey that we sent out to outfitters and guides, and another one that we look at from non-resident visitors to the state, more on the client side. So again, my name is Carter Birmingham. I just want to give a quick shout out to Kara Grau. She is our Assistant Director of Economic Analysis and was really helpful in putting a lot of this information together, especially from the economic analysis side. I'm not an economist by trade, so this was somewhat of an education for me, but she was really helpful in this process, kind of getting it off the ground and helping me out through this process. And then also Emma Keeneth Lopez, she was a graduate student in our office, but she's with us full time now, and she was really helpful in doing a lot of the research, kind of getting this off the ground, and then helping with some of the report writing that went along with this as well. So just kind of wanted to give those guys a quick shout out. So just a little bit on the direction that we're going to be heading today. Just want to talk to you briefly about ITRR and who we are. I would imagine if you're on this call, you're probably fairly familiar with who we are and what we do, but just for posterity's sake, we publish these up to YouTube. And so if there's someone that might see this later on down the line, just to kind of give them some information about our office and what we do. So we'll talk a little bit about the project background and some of the study purpose and kind of what led us here. And then I want to talk to you about the methods. As I mentioned, it's this two-part survey, so I kind of want to get into a little bit of what we had from both sides. And then we'll do a pretty kind of 30,000 foot overview of some of the results from the outfitter and guide side, and then also from their client side. And then we'll leave a little bit of time at the end just to kind of leave you guys with some final thoughts, and then we'll leave some room for question and answer. So if there's something that you kind of want to talk about at the end, feel free to stick around, and we'll go ahead and turn folks their cameras and mics on, and you guys can participate at the end there. So just a little bit about who we are at ITRR. We serve as the research arm for Montana's tourism and recreation industry. So we were established in 1987. And when they created the lodging and facility use tax, they put aside a small portion of that tax collection for the maintenance of a university research system. And so that's when we were founded in 1987. We're actually coming up on our 40th anniversary. So pretty proud of the work that we've been able to do over the past several decades, and looking forward to more work as we move forward. But I won't really get into our research cycle very much, but the one thing I would highlight really quick, though, is that every fall we do a call for projects out to the public. So if you would like to be included on our solicitation list, please stick around to the end. I have a little QR code that can get you guys signed up for our newsletter, and I think it'd be really beneficial, just because it's always great to have more people chiming in and giving us some ideas as they relate to this research effort that we do. So I just wanted to just touch on that very quickly, but we do a lot of research all the way from non-resident visitors to the state of Montana to visitor stats counts for the Montana State Park System, and just a lot of stuff that's going on. So a little bit about the project background and the study purpose. So as I mentioned, this is something that we've done in our office. We did one in 2007, and we did another one in 2017. And so we really look to replicate this study almost identically, and it really focuses on a few things. The first is the economic contribution that non-residents have to the state within this industry. It's not to say that we're not focused or interested in what the contribution that residents have, but when we're talking about economic contribution, it's really these new dollars that are coming into our economy from folks that are non-residents. So that's one of the first parts. The second part is we want to try and look at the industry supply and just the diversity of outfitted and guided experiences that are in Montana. We understand that, fishing and hunting are ones that have been around for a long time, but one of the things that we've seen change from that original study in 2007 to now is just the growth of our national parks. The more the focus that we have had on our tourism economy, we've seen that there are just more and more activities that are being offered from a guided perspective in the state. So we want to take a look at that, and then just get a characterization of outfitters and guides within the industry. So thinking about who these individuals are, and just what the makeup looks like of these folks that are participating. So just a few research objectives that we had for this particular effort. The first one, we wanted to try and estimate the number of outfitters and guides that are working in Montana. And as I mentioned, that's across all outdoor recreation activities. So we actually asked about 22 different activity types that people could be offering services for. And that leads into that second point there is we wanted to get an inventory of the number, the type, and then how long these trips were lasting for all these offerings that are being provided by outfitters and guides in the state. So that's the second part there. The third one, we wanted to focus on some of the client demographics and just what their trip characteristics look like. So who are these individuals that are hiring an outfitter and guide? Where are they coming from? How much money are they spending? Just things like that. So the fourth piece, and I think really the most important piece that we find from the previous studies is looking at estimating the economic contribution that the Montana outfitting and guiding industry has for the state's economy. And so we'll get into that a little bit. And then finally, we just wanted to compare some of the similarities and differences that we had seen from the 2017 study. So we know that, things change over time. A lot has changed in the last 10 years. So it's not quite apples to apples, but just kind of a few things that we found interesting in what we had seen from the previous study until now. So the first piece I want to talk about is just the methods that we use for this outfitter and guide survey. So we sent an online survey out to outfitters and guides in the summer of 2025. We did that in the summer of 2025, asking about 2024 business activity because we wanted to wait until the tax season was done for that 2024 season. And then several of the questions that we asked of individuals had to do with their tax filings. So thank you to everyone that was kind enough to dig their taxes up and report some of that information to us. We really appreciate it. It was about a 25-minute survey as well, so it was quite a significant burden that we asked people to participate in. But we had 426 people that completed the survey from the outfitter and guide perspective. So that was really, really beneficial for us. And we wanted to just say thank you to those folks that might have participated in that. Our sampling frame, where we were able to get the contact information from for these individuals. So the Montana Board of Outfitters has a really extensive list of the individuals that are registered with the state that are either guides or outfitters themselves. So that's underneath the Montana Department of Labor and Industry, but they have some good resources as well. The United States Forest Service has special use permits that they require for individuals that want to be essentially participating in commercial activity on national forest lands. So they had some information that we were able to get as well. And then one of the big differences actually in this year's study was that we decided to include individuals that were commercial use authorization holders for both Yellowstone National Park and Glacier National Park. We've added some listening sessions to a lot of these research processes that we've been in. And that was one of the things that we did hear from participants was that we would probably be missing out on quite a few individuals if we didn't include those groups. So we made sure to focus on businesses that were listed within Montana. So we didn't want to include folks from Wyoming or Idaho or the Canadian side. And we were specific about asking about business activity that's in Montana or businesses that were in Montana. So that's kind of where we were able to generate the list of individuals from. We had close to 4,000 individuals of contact information that we were able to get. And we were able to estimate that we think there's about 1,500 businesses in the state that are offering services related to outfitting and guiding. There's about 4,000 individuals that are participating as outfitters and guides combined. And that figure on the right that you're seeing here is essentially the number of individuals that are outfitters and or guides in each county that we have in the state. And so when we'll talk a little bit about some of the spending that we see across the state as well, it's almost kind of like a one-to-one overlay of what we're seeing on this map here. But unsurprisingly, I think, a lot of the activity is concentrated around this Yellowstone National Park area, into the Bitterroot, up into Missoula, and into this Flathead area around Glacier National Park. It's where a lot of our airports are. It's where a lot of our outdoor recreation is, and it's where a lot of these opportunities are. So final point here, we worked with the Montana Outfitter and Guide Association as well as the Wild Livelihoods Business Coalition. They were kind enough to include announcements in their newsletter asking some of their membership to participate. So just we could add to some of the legitimacy of the research that we're doing and just try and get it in front of as many people as we possibly could. So that's that method side from the Outfitter and Guide survey. When we're talking about the information that we're able to get from the client side, this comes from our non-resident visitor survey that we do. We've been doing this on an annual basis, actually going back to 2009. And a lot of this comes from intercept surveys that we do across the state. So we have 10, sometimes 11 surveyors. They cover over 9 areas across the state. Over 65 different communities end up being represented, but they're at gas stations, they're at rest stops, they're at airports across the state, and they're surveying not only non-residents but residents as well. This particular effort was more focused on non-residents. We surveyed pretty close to 10,000 non-residents for that 2024 year. And we ask them a whole, host of questions to do with how long is their trip, how many are in your group, what are the transportation modes that you're using. But the big one that we ask them is how much money have you spent in the last 24 hours? And it's on all these different expenditure categories that you're seeing here on the right. So that has to do with gas, hotels, restaurants and bars, groceries, snacks. The one that I just highlighted here is this spending that we get from individuals who said that they hired an outfitter and guide. When we see the results from that, about 6% of all the total expenditures end up coming back to this outfitter and guide figure for 2024, which was 314 million. So again, we estimate there was about 3.7 million people that visited the state of Montana in 2024. They spent close to $5 billion, and 6% of that alone was just on outfitter and guide expenditures. So that's where we were able to get some of this information from the client side. We take all that, we put it together, and we get this bigger picture of what the entire industry looks like from both sides. So just talking a little bit about the industry structure and what some of the employment looks like for the folks that are outfitters and guides. This comes from the Outfitter and Guide Survey. 43% of individuals said that they were operating as a sole proprietor. Another 36% said that they're operating as an LLC, and then we had 11% that fell into that S corp category, and then smaller percentages that were either partnerships, nonprofits, independent contractors, things of that sort. So it is a very, there's a very small business feel to it. It's a very localized kind of mom and pop operation. Some folks might have been in this for 2-3 generations within the same business. So it is something, it's not the mega corps that are kind of coming in and doing a lot of this. It is very locally focused. When we look at the results that came out of the workforce side, unsurprisingly, when you think about the nature of what outdoor recreation in Montana is like, it is very concentrated in that summer season. So the workforce also reflects that as well. Close to 40% of individuals were hired as contract labor. Another 24% were full-time, but they were less than 150 days. 21% were part-time, less than 150 days. So a pretty good chunk of individuals that are being hired on a seasonal basis. The average age of an outfitter and guide in our survey was 47 years old. The average outfitter was hiring right around 5 guides per season. And then 60% of the folks that we surveyed, they were in operation 6 months or less out of the year. So it is something, again, that's very seasonal when you think about the opportunity for floating, the opportunity for hunting. A lot of these are very condensed windows, but just something that we were seeing. I think 10% of folks that said that they were in operation throughout the entire year. So there are people that are keeping it going throughout the entire season, but for the most part, individuals are 6 months or less. The average amount of time spent in operation for a business was 14 years, and they plan to be in operation for another 18 years going forward. So it's folks that have been in the industry for quite a while and people that are planning to operate for quite a bit of time going into the future. 92% of our sample were male. So I think, not surprising, it's a pretty male-dominated field. When we look at the client side as well, I think 66% of people that hired an outfitter and guide were male as well. So I think there's opportunity for growth in that area there, but just some of the results that we saw from outfitters and guides themselves. When we look at the clients and the client days by activity type, wildlife viewing was the highest proportion that we saw in our sample. Served about a little over 300,000 clients at 309,000 client days. And so just to kind of give you an example, if a hunting guide was serving 10 clients for 3 days, that would be 30 total client days. And this is kind of how a lot of the report logs work for activity types. But we wanted to ask about individual activities as opposed to just the entirety of all the activity that they had, so we can get an idea of what some of these different activity types look like. But wildlife viewing was the top contributor. Sightseeing tours were another big one as well, but much shorter trip length, as you can see. Fishing was represented 153,000 estimated clients. The trip was a little bit longer at 1.4 days. And then looking at the hunting category, we had 32,000 estimated clients that were served, but 105,000 client days. So we're looking at, much longer trips as they compare to some of these other activity types. But we had an estimation of just under 1 million clients that were served, 980,000 for a total of 1.2 million client days. So I'll talk about it in a little bit, but it's about 30% growth from what we had seen in our last study that we did in 2017. So just kind of one of the higher findings that we had in the report there. Revenues by activity, fishing was the highest estimated revenue activity that we had seen from outfitters and guides. Again, this is coming from information that we asked folks to send us from their tax filings. And it's just by activity type. One thing was that we didn't include gratuities, retail sales, accommodations. If you're selling waiters out of the fly shop, that wasn't included in this as well. This was just business activity as it related to the activity type. So fishing was the highest contributor there. Wildlife viewing was another significant contributor. And then hunting was another significant contributor there at $67 million. So when we're looking at it, it was about 3% of clients that were served from a hunting perspective, but they're contributing quite a bit amount of money. And I think that just speaks to the nature of the opportunities that we have in Montana. I'll talk about it from the client side in a little bit, but we're seeing that folks are coming from far and wide to Montana to participate in these particular activities. So overall, just short of $400 million, $376 million in estimated revenue is what we saw in our sample from the information that we received from outfitters and guides. Looking at just some of the operational challenges, I think just to ask you guys to think back to 2024, it was a pretty tough water year. In particular, just some of the rivers that listed on the bottom, the Madison, the Big Hole, the Gallatin, the Blackfoot, the Clark Fork. These are a lot of our gem, rivers across the state. They were put on hoot owl. The North Fork of the Flathead was on hoot owl restrictions for the first time in recorded history. For those of you that aren't familiar with hoot owl, it's a fishing restriction that gets put on due to high water temperatures on the river and or low stream flows. So it's something that Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks does to obviously protect the resource. But when we asked individuals if they had been affected by closures or restrictions, 64% said that they did deal with the closure or restriction during that 2024 season. Half of all the people that we had surveyed said that they were affected by hoot owl. 47% had to relocate trips to alternative waters, and there was, I think, 17 rivers that we were able to find that were placed on hoot owl during that 2024 season. So this figure on the left here is just looking at this 64% of individuals who were affected. The highest number were affected by hoot owl. There were land closures as well, either due to fire, restoration efforts. One of the things that we saw come out of Paradise Valley was there were a lot of folks that had lost some access spots due to the flood that took place in 2022, and they still hadn't really recovered from that. But we just kind of wanted to point this one out because this is something that we saw in the previous study as well, and I think it's something that is probably going to be part of the business operations and the way of life going forward, as opposed to just kind of a one-off instance that we saw from year to year. So if anyone's been keeping their eye on stream flow data this year, I think we're probably going to be heading for some more hoot owl in our near future. So just some of the kind of high level findings that we found from the outfitter and guide side. So just to switch gears here a little bit, I want to focus on some of these results that we saw from the client side. So again, this comes from our non-resident survey that we do of individuals that we are able to capture in the state of Montana and that we can chat with. And the way that we've broken it out is this group on the left here is you're going to be looking at folks that are that said that they hired an outfitter and guide, and then we want to talk about some of the daily expenditures that they have. But the one on the right is just a comparison to what would be essentially our average visitor to the state. So just doing a comparison between those that hired and then what we typically see from folks. So if we take a look at that, you can see that the average daily spending from individuals that hire an outfitter and guide is about 4 times higher. For those individuals, the group spending is significantly higher. It's about 5.5 times higher than what we see from our average visitor. And that's really happening because, one, the individuals that hire outfitter and guides, they're staying much longer. So 8 days really compared to 5 days. The group size is bigger, 3 compared to 2. And then also they have much more disposable income. So half of the individuals that hired an outfitter and guide in our in the client study had the annual household income of over $150,000. 62% of individuals were over 60 years old and 66% were male. And I don't think that's too surprising because when you kind of think about the nature of a lot of these outdoor recreation activities, they're really physically demanding, whether it's, going out and hunting and hauling an elk out, like you're probably going to need some help after you hit 60. You're going to have more money to do it. It's probably a once in a lifetime opportunity for a lot of individuals. Rafting as well. Fishing was, it's not surprising that we see a group that has more money that's a little bit older that are participating in these activities compared to what our average visitor looks like. The top states where individuals were coming from, California, Texas, Minnesota, Washington, and Michigan. So again, this is something where people they're coming from around the country to Montana because of what we have to offer. When we compare that to our average visitor is generally from Washington, Idaho, North Dakota, Wyoming, or Alberta, Canada. Not surprising, those are all of our border states. But just to kind of give you an idea of some of the differences that we found in the individuals that are coming to the state. So just looking at some of the expenditures across Montana. So again, here's this 5 billion figure that I was talking about, the $314 million here that it's spent on outfitters and guides. The Montana Department of Commerce, they have these different travel regions across the state where they like to separate out and have different focus areas. 156 million of that expenditure number is ending up in this Flathead, or in this glacier country here around Flathead Glacier National Park. 139 million in this area, all the way down from essentially the South Bob Marshall down to the Beaverhead over into the Madison. $81 million in this area bordering around Yellowstone National Park, and then falls off a little bit when we get up here into central Montana, Missouri River Country, and southeast Montana. But just kind of wanted to give you guys an idea of kind of what the dispersion looks like for some of these activities, and the revenue generation that's happening across the state. So. And also, I just want to mention too, so 6% of all the individuals that we surveyed, of that 3.7 million, said that they hired an outfitter and guide in 24. So looking at the economic contribution of some of these outfitted trips. So the direct impacts, these are things that are coming from non-resident travelers that are purchasing these goods and services. These indirect impacts, these result from purchases that are made by travel-related businesses. And then an induced impact is just the result of those individuals that are employed in travel-related occupations, kind of what they're spending on as well. So it's this really overarching, comprehensive spending estimate, but this comes from an economic in-plan model that we use for a lot of our analysis. And we found that it's about $1.27 billion in this economic contribution that's coming from this industry. Over 10,000 jobs being supported, 440 million in labor income, and another 709 million in the value added that's coming into our economy. So we saw about 30% growth from what we had seen, as I mentioned in that 2017 study, but just a lot of business going on out there. Finally, I wanted to talk about just some of the differences that we had seen in the key comparisons from 2017 to 2024. As I mentioned, the number of clients was up about 35% from what we had seen in that previous effort. The non-resident outfitter spending was up 30%. The average trip spending was up 19%. The total economic output, not as much growth as we had seen in some of the other figures, but still growing as well. 5.4% of people that we had surveyed in 2017 had hired an outfitter and guide. We saw about 6% in 24, so that's fairly consistent. And then the average daily spending from 2017 to 2024 was up 13% from what we had seen in 2017. These are non-inflation adjusted figures, so just wanted to call that out, but just something that we saw from the differences in 2017 to 24. Finally, the limitations, some things that we just wanted to point out. So establishing a census and making sure we're capturing everybody in this industry can be somewhat difficult. There are 22 different activity types that we asked about, so making sure that we're including everybody is quite difficult, to be honest. It's not as easy as you might think. So we feel that these estimates are probably fairly conservative, and in more of a bit of a lower bound than what might actually be out there, but just one of the limitations we wanted to call out. We did have a fairly low sample size for quite a few activities, particularly whitewater rafting. We did a follow-up effort in this spring to try and get some more individuals to participate, but we think that we're probably undercounting the number of people that are in that activity type and the number of individuals that are in that space as well. So wanted to highlight that. As I mentioned, gratuities we did not include in spending estimates. We know that's a big part, especially if you're a guide on how much money you might be getting from these activities. Anything from 15 to 25% on a trip, that's $500, right, for a half day float on the Blackfoot. That's significant spending as well. But we just wanted to call that out. The revenue collected from other sources isn't included. So if you had fly shop revenue, if you had, an apartment that was above your business, we didn't include that either. And then finally, spending estimates, they're just that. They're just estimates. This is the old saying that all models are wrong, but some are useful. I think that's kind of what falls into this. So this is a model that we've used now for the past 2 studies, but just wanted to kind of caution that as we move forward into the final product. So just some final thoughts. It's something that we've seen and has been patterned across several studies now. It's a very high value, low volume type of activity, meaning that about 6% of all non-residents participate in this activity, but they're accounting for about 18% of all the total visitor spending. Again, that has to do with the fact that they're staying longer, they're in bigger groups, they have more disposable income. So there's this kind of high value visitor pattern that we've documented across several surveys now. Fishing, wildlife, and hunting, they're really driving a lot of the revenue. Fishing and wildlife are generating about over half the revenue. Hunting is another significant contributor there, even though it's only 3% of the total clients served. Kind of this climate piece is a growing threat. It's something that we're seeing more and more often. And so I think kind of looking to the future in your own business operations, if you're in this space, it's probably something to plan for and something to kind of keep in mind when you're thinking about your season moving forward. And finally, just the considerable economic impact that it has. It's $1.2 billion in economic output. This is a significant contributor to our economy in Montana, and something that has been a big piece and a big focus in the state over the past several decades now, really. And so again, it was just kind of good to find that we had similar results to what we've seen in past efforts. So with that, I will go ahead and open it up to questions. I will probably just minimize this screen share here real quick, just so I can kind of see if there are comments coming in and things of that sort. But if you have a question, anything you'd like to kind of comment on, please go ahead and reach out and let me know, and we'll take a look at that.